Hey there, I have a quick leadership principle that I want to share with you. And just to give you a little bit of the backstory, I just finished a success interview from my Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast. I had the privilege just a few minutes ago of interviewing Jason Harris, who is the president and CEO of the award-winning creative agency Mechanism. And you know what a powerful interview. And that interview will come out in the next few days. So stay tuned. If you haven't subscribed to my podcast on iTunes or YouTube, the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast, I invite you to do so. But here, when I was reading his book, The Soulful Art of Persuasion, I came across this research and a story that he shared, and I thought I would just share it with you as a reminder, a leadership reminder. And he points out in the book that there was a survey done with 20,000 employees that was conducted by Harvard Business Review. And one of the things that they discovered as they examined the poll as it identified that the most important aspect to leadership in the poll was that of having respect for your people. And I think, especially right now in this culture of pushback and pushing back at autocratic authority styles, for 20 years I've been teaching that it's important to be respected. It's important to be liked. It's important to be kind to people. He just points out this little story I thought was cool. In the book, he points out that in 2009, at the Orient Road Jail in Florida, that there was an officer named Ken Moon. When this officer was sitting at his desk, he was unexpectedly attacked by an inmate. But lo and behold, in the moment that he was in a chokehold that could have taken his life, 4 other inmates pulled that inmate off him and saved Officer Ken Moon's life. Now, why would they do that? I tell you what, Jason Harris points out in his book that it had to do with respect. This is what it said. As one of the inmates put it, he said, quote, "Moon goes out of his way. Even though he's an officer, he acts like a father figure. The deputy had treated the inmates with respect and as equals. And as a result, they instinctively took his side. Even though it was his job to keep them locked up, they protected him when his life was threatened." Here's my quick thought for right now. When you see the chaos, the violence that's going on in the United States right now and in some places around the world, a lot of it has to do with the lack of respect. So as a leader, do you show respect to those you lead? See, one of the core aspects to determine whether you're an effective leader or not is whether you have followers. Right? And I don't mean blind followers. I mean students and those that are willing to get behind your vision and support it. And the question is, if you don't have that, and if you're leading through an autocratic leadership style, I'm telling you now, that doesn't work. Today, more than ever before, is there a need for leaders and managers to lead from a place of respect and kindness. That doesn't mean that you can't demand certain things or invite people to align to certain things and have some level of accountability. That's very important as a leader, but you can do it in a kind way. So I only share that message with you just to remind you there's always a balance between 2 traits, if you will. One trait is for leaders, the desire to hold people accountable, to be an enforcer. But the paradox to that trait is to show compassion, to have warmth and empathy. And here's what I find as I do executive coaching, and sometimes these leaders don't even realize that they're doing it. They're off balance. Either maybe let's say they're an 8 or a 9 on enforcement, but they're only a 2 or a 3 on compassion or warmth and empathy. I'm telling you that there's a balance, right? On the flip side, there's also a balance. There are some leaders and managers who are an 8 or a 9 when it comes to warmth and empathy, but only a 2 or a 3 on enforcement. And those people are looked at as though they are weak leaders. And right, so you either have a weak leader or you have a really strong leader that nobody likes. So on both ends of the spectrum, people don't want to follow those types of leaders. So what's the answer? The answer is you've got to come someplace in the middle where you're a disciplinarian, not really, but I think of my children when I say that you got to hold your kids accountable for their decisions and so forth and expectations, right? I have 20-year-old children and we also took a break and I still have some kids at home. And let me tell you something here. I've always thought from this place of a philosophy, it's my job to hold my kids accountable, to expect greatness, to not allow for excuses in their language or in their behavior. But you know what? That is 50% or 45% with 50 or 55% being on the warmth and empathy. Here's one thing my children know. They know what my wife Danielle and my expectations are for life and achievement and living a good, wholesome life. But at the same time, we recognize that mistakes may take place every once in a while. And what they need is warmth and empathy to know that we will love them regardless. And you know what? The great leaders that I've been fortunate to serve over 20 years recognize that mistakes will happen, but they also recognize that we need to reward the effort. They also recognize that we need to build people from where they are, yet still hold them accountable, but that love and respect and kindness should overpower the enforcement. Does that make sense? So if you are a leader who tends to be too much an enforcer, I invite you to tone that down a little bit. Actually, you can keep that high, but you need to bring your warmth and empathy higher, okay? You should probably be an 8 or a 9 in both of those traits. And by the way, we as a consulting agency can actually measure how well you do on those different traits, and in fact, how those match up with your other team members. So if you're interested in learning that and actually getting hard data to show you where you're at, we can provide tools that can do that, okay? And they're very accurate. Okay, have I said enough already? The key in leadership, in part, it's not everything, but in part, and it weighs heavily, is that of being respectful. If you want respect, then be respectful. If you want to be trusted, then be trustworthy. You reap what you sow. I love the story that Jason Harris shared in the book, that here you have inmates protecting the guard. Why? Because of the way the guard treated those inmates. Okay, think about that as you go in to work and as you work with others. Respect really goes a long way. All right, thanks for listening, and make sure that you check out my podcast. The Jason Harris interview will come out in a few days. All right, wish you the best. Bye-bye for now. Podcast listeners, thanks for listening. You've taken time out of your schedule, and I really appreciate it. Now do me a favor. If you like what you heard, star it. Thanks. Now go unleash your greatness within.
GreatnessWithin.com